Welcome to This Week in Birding for the week ending May 29th, 2020. Bob Dolgan here again with Josh Engel. And we figured we'd go right to it and kick off with the story that continues to captivate a city, and that is Monty and Rose. And Monty and Rose, as we all know by now, they returned on May 1st to Montrose Beach within really hours of each other. Amazing. And now after a couple weeks of quiet, we found out that they have scraped a nest, and then Rose has laid 4 eggs now. So hooray for that! We've come full circle. It's almost exactly a year since the first egg was laid last year, and I think one of the there's all sorts of interesting aspects to this year, and one of them being that the new nest site is in quite a different location. It's more in the interior of the Montrose Beach Dunes site, and closer to the fishing pier, if people know that area, in a more gravelly or kind of cobbled area with close proximity to marram and other dune grasses. So, but hey, they're protected out there. The park isn't open, and likely we could have chicks again, and it happened so quickly. We could have chicks by as soon as about June 17th. So that is an incredible thing to contemplate, that we're in this position again already. But I suppose that's how it goes with nature. It's an annual cycle.
I was amazed when I was reading the information about them that Monty and Rose each have favored areas where they go to forage on the beach that are different. Monty goes one place and Rose goes another. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and it sounded like they were, at least one, I'm not sure if it was Monty or Rose, were foraging way on the far western edge of the site, closer over to the dog beach, which was kind of interesting, because likely shorebirds have made all sorts of use of the entirety of the Montrose Point ecosystem here, maybe in a new way over the past couple of months.
Yeah. They have this newfound freedom without interference from people and dogs. They can pick where they want to go, and
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, they don't have to worry about when the crowds arrive on a warm day. And the dog walkers letting a dog just run wild while you have like an American golden plover hanging out right on the beach. So I mean, it's a really it's a fun story. I mean, I think it's going to be thrilling for people who haven't had many outlets during these past many weeks to enjoy nature, to see maybe some more photos out of there. And thanks to the Park District and Fish and Wildlife and IDNR for providing us all with some wonderful updates to get us through this. So I think the other piece that I was talking to someone about is that now that the site is protected even more so, maybe any chicks would be banded this year, since it's maybe perhaps less of a fragile situation than last year when we had unbanded chicks. So we might even learn more about the Chicago piping plovers and where they head
that'd be awesome
in the future. Yeah. So moving right along, so we're going to talk a little bit about as spring migration starts to wind down, the big movements of warblers have taken place. One of those big movements was last Sunday, and I was up at Gilson Park, and I don't know if you'd quite call it a fallout, but it was a nice movement of a couple, not a couple, probably a dozen or so warbler species being present, and on a beautiful Sunday morning. And I wanted to share this anecdote because I think it's something that birders should be aware of, especially new birders. And there's a famous quote by Ken Kaufman, the famed field guide author and birder, and his quote is that the only difference between a new birder, I might have this a little off, Josh, feel free to chime in. The only difference between a new birder and an experienced birder is that the experienced birder has made many more mistakes than the new birder. And so the reason I'm sharing this is because every year I have this tendency almost every year to misidentify like warblers as I'm first encountering them. I've only been out a handful of times this year, and when I came across this big grouping of warblers with my friend Joel Kurzman on Sunday, right in Gilson Park along the garden walk there, I was like, I was just like, you're kind of trying to, there were warblers, there were a couple of vireo species. There's actually a white-eyed vireo really clearly right in front of me, very visible, which was awesome. And you're like kind of thinking, wow, you don't know where to look or where to sort of, what direction in which you should listen. And I heard a call that I just haven't heard in a long time. And I thought it was a cerulean warbler, which, is we've talked about on the show before. It's a prized sort of warbler species in the area. And I actually sent a text about it, and Josh, in fact, replied. I mean, it was after contemplating it and seeing a black-throated blue warbler right in front of me, and then quickly checking a bird guide, I realized my mistake, that it was not a cerulean warbler. And I apologize to the people I texted and a couple of nearby birders who were there, that I was like, oh, that's a cerulean warbler. They do have, I think, a fairly similar call. So I don't feel, or song. So I don't feel like, like it was crazily off, but, and a black-throated blue warbler is still an awesome bird. So, but I wanted to share that because it's, I think one of the issues we can have in birding is sometimes people feel deterred by the amount of knowledge that people have, and like, you can't make a mistake. And I think we need to kind of get past that. And so I was a little embarrassed, but Josh, you were on the other end.
We have to realize most of us only hear warbler songs for a couple weeks all year, right? So there's those couple of weeks in May, you're hearing a lot of warblers, and then you don't hear them again for a full year. So there's always a relearning process, a refamiliarization process, that's involved with these bird songs, because we don't have many breeding warblers around here. So very easy to mistake some of those similar songs, Cerulean, black-throated blue, Parula, that have these rising buzzy notes. So yeah, it's very easy to mistake those. And I always find myself in the springtime hearing songs that I just can't place, trying to track them down, sometimes successfully and sometimes not, of course. But yeah, there's, every year it's a learning process again.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I go back to listening to the songs, and sometimes in the field now, of course, with the, mobile apps and an iPhone, you can pick up a song right there and check into it. But
yeah, what app do you use for bird songs?
I probably should use something. I actually have just been using the All About Birds guide. It's actually, I don't even know if it's an app, if I just have it as a bookmark on my Safari.
Yeah, that's what it would be. Yeah, a really good one that I like is actually probably uses many of the same recordings as Merlin. It's a free app, primarily for bird identification, but they actually have excellent recordings of a pretty good variety of calls for many birds. So that's a great free option for people, the Merlin app by the Cornell Lab. And we've talked about that briefly before, about its sudden increase in popularity now that birding is having a moment during the pandemic.
Right. No, for sure. I mean, I guess I always go back to, and I feel like I bring up this theme a lot in this show, but I used to have to listen to tapes and records of bird songs. Just is once again one of the many innovations in birding that have made it more accessible to people, are the variety of easy to use mobile apps that can be an entree for folks, and help make those IDs even right out in the field if you have a cell signal. So yeah, it's but I apologize, Josh, for I don't know if you were in your car.
I was about to be. I was to be out right in the area.
Okay.
Because I was out looking for birds at Perkins Woods, which is quite nearby in Evanston, and so I was about to come, but you saved me the trip.
Yeah, I texted you back quickly when I realized my mistake, but yeah, I mean, it's tough. I think there just are a lot of warbler songs that are fairly similar, and when you see that about what.
And speaking of bird songs, we're into the period of flycatchers, which is when knowing bird vocalizations can be really important, because a lot of the flycatchers that are coming through now are so similar in appearance that they can be, even with a very good view, they can be impossible to identify, or certainly with not a good view, they are very, very difficult to identify. So knowing sounds is really really clutch. And I actually had right in my yard, I had this amazing views of a flycatcher in the genus Empidonax, you know, the ones that birders refer to as empids. This group of very similar looking flycatchers that are migrating through, especially in late May. And it looked very much like an Acadian flycatcher, which is pretty uncommon around here. But it would not call. It would not call. I was taking pictures and videos with my phone through my scope, and I let a couple other local birders know, and one even came over and saw it and took pictures. And I'm still not sure what that bird is. It's a little bit frustrating, you know, when you get such a good view of something, but you don't know what it is. But you know, that's going to happen with flycatchers. Sometimes you just have to throw up your hands and admit that you can't identify them. But you know, we also have there's yellow-bellied flycatchers. That's a really nice one that's coming through now. Less common one. Willow and alder flycatchers are coming through now. Olive-sided flycatcher. And of course, the breeders, eastern wood peewees, are a common migrant through the end of May and even into the beginning of June, along with great-crested flycatcher, another woodland breeder that migrates often quite late.
Yeah, no, they're a great ID challenge. And they're just, you know, super neat birds to check out. They have really specific habitats that they nest in, and a few do stick around here, you know, through the summer. But a couple of people asked me how I've tried to ID flycatchers and sound, especially the empids. The sound, like for me at least, the sound is pretty much what I go to. If there's a silent empid, I have a really I would say that's beyond my expertise to make a call on that. And so it can be challenging. And even early in the season, I'll get thrown off. I mean, this sounds crazy. I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, but like I'll see like an empid, and I'll think like kinglet. I'll think like ruby crown kinglet first, because there's a white wing bar, and it's a very similar coloration. And if you don't see the ruby crown, and after a whole spring of looking at ruby crowns, I'm like, wow, that's at first a ruby crown. I'm like, oh wait, no, that is bigger, and they're not that much bigger than quite small.
Gray birds with white eye rings and white wing bars. You know, they're you know, the plumage pattern is really similar between a kinglet and a let's say a least flycatcher.
Yeah, and then I kind of go up the ladder and think of like, you have, you know, size can not always be a great characteristic, but still you have like kind of the empids, then you have sort of a peewee, usually a little bit bigger, and then a phoebe kind of somewhere in there, but they're more of an early season migrant, and then on up to something like a great crested flycatcher, eastern kingbird being probably the most distinctive of, and maybe great crested flycatcher too, if you get a good look at it. So
yeah, and a lot of them breed. Well, a number of them breed around here too. So if you were to go to a forest preserve that had sort of a mix of habitats, you might have eastern phoebes breeding right around the parking lot because they like breeding under eaves. So if there's a picnic shelter, they like to put their nest right under the eave of the picnic shelter. If you have to walk through a scrubby area before you get to the woods, there might be willow flycatchers breeding in that habitat. And then you get into the woods and you'll have great cresteds and peewees breeding in those places. So some of them will stick around. I also wanted to point out that, you know, you were mentioning technology as an aid to birding and bird identification. Well, now, you know, flycatchers are very difficult to identify visually. Sound is the best way to do it, but their sounds can be confusing too at times.
Yeah,
but anyone can pull out their phone and make a recording now. You know, it's sort of an underrated identification tool. Is you just
I agree.
a voice record app, make a sound recording, and then you can send it to someone or post it online, and people can chime in and help you identify it. You know, so just a great learning and identification tool.
Yeah, and I think also just for enjoyment purposes, I love to like go back and listen to a sound clip from a really like, you know, a forest or something, or a marsh where there's just so many sounds. Like, you know, I'll go in the dead of winter and listen to something I recorded in the spring or summer previously, and I'm just like, wow, this is, I think it's just amazing. It just kind of takes you back. So
yeah, we also, you know, the most difficult of all flycatchers to identify are these Empidonax, especially willow and alder flycatcher. And I actually did a study of those, the DNA of those, when I worked at the Field Museum. That's a topic for another time. It was really an interesting study that I still need to publish, but that's a topic for another time.
Awesome. Sweet. We'll have to, maybe we'll have another This Week in Birding Live for that.
Yeah.
But cool. We also wanted to take this is, there's so much we could talk about just on flycatchers. But this is, now we're turning our attention to some early summer birding as spring migration winds down. And Josh and I wanted to highlight a few early summer hotspots. Josh, do you want to kind of lead into a few thoughts on those?
Well, I was going to cross the state line over to Indiana. I was there. I was there last week. I'm going to be there again tomorrow. Northern Indiana, some great early summer spots with a wide variety of habitats. You can get really an awesome diversity of birds over the course of the day. The Indiana Dunes State Park is a great place for woodland birds. They have cerulean warblers breeding and Kentucky warblers, prothonotary warblers, prairie warblers in the around the tower that we talked about on our live show last week. Lots of red-headed woodpeckers. You can find Acadian flycatcher, pileated woodpecker. So it's really a great spot. It's only about an hour, a little over an hour from the city. And if you can combine that with another Indiana spot that's an hour south of there, or you can do that as a separate trip down to the Kankakee Sands and Willow Slough area, grasslands and shrubland and more woodlands, where you can find birds like dickcissels, sedge-wren, henslow sparrows, grasshopper sparrows, bobolinks, meadowlarks, and then also blue grosbeaks and white-eyed vireos and chats. So it's a lot of birds that people will be very excited to see right in the immediate vicinity of the Chicago lakefront. But they can be, you don't have to go that far to find places where they're a lot more common, more expected. And you can stay out, if you go in the evening and stay out after dark or get there very early, the Willow Slough area of Indiana and just across the state line in Illinois, Iroquois County Conservation Area, have a lot of whippoorwills.
Yeah.
I was there the other day. I think I put 10 whippoorwills on my eBird list, but there could have been even more. I mean, it was really an amazing cacophony of whippoorwills singing, chorus of whippoorwills singing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a great variety of habitat in those areas, and you can feel like you're very far from Chicago, but you're still in the region and able to nab some birds for your Indiana or Illinois list that you might not be likely to get throughout the rest of the year. And I think those are great drives, and they're easy to make if you live in the city and kind of just go due south.
Yeah.
I would say, there are some other forest preserves I think of at this time of year. Some, even Cook County forest preserves, like in the Palos region, can be a great place to visit, and you might get a little more variety of breeding species there than you're likely to see kind of closer into the city. But yeah, I mean, you know these places really well. Like, I mean, the dunes and Kankakee Sands and points in that direction are incredible.
I forgot to mention a bird that does not occur really any closer to Chicago than those spots is northern bobwhite. You'd be very lucky to see one, but you often will hear them calling from fields and scrubby fields down there. A bird that used to occur much closer to the Chicago area, but has been totally wiped out. I also want to point out one place that's a little bit farther away, but to the north is Horicon Marsh in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
National Wildlife Refuge. That's a really good spot. A place where you can see a lot of yellow-headed blackbirds, for example, common gallinule, least bittern sometimes, black tern sometimes, along with lots of more common wetland breeding birds, herons, egrets, marsh wrens, birds like that. So that's another really good early summer spot.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's just a short drive. Like, these are, not like these could be maybe make for nice day trips, or get there and back. You don't even have to stay overnight. So, I mean, it's there are a lot of options, and I think going right into the summer, birding doesn't have to really slow down just because the spring migration is slowed down. So there's just there are continual opportunities to experience new things, which is one of the great things about this. So, well, I think that wraps up our show. Thank you so much, Josh. Thanks everybody
as always.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll look forward to being back next